In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to draw branches on a tree. So first of all, I don't want to draw the whole tree. I'm going to use a viewfinder to select my composition. And I really want to get some good strong diagonal lines. And then I'm also thinking about where my focal point may be. Now I recommend that you lay out your drawing with an HB pencil. And what you're seeing here is I'm sighting. Now there's different ways of sighting, and this method is where I actually hold the pencil up exactly even with the particular branch, and holding my arm straight, I then rotate my arm so I can see, here I go, see what that, there it is, see what that angle is. Okay, and it really helps me see the angles, just to hold the pencil right up against that angle and then swing your arm around and get those angles right. Now this is called gesture drawing, and we use the gesture drawing when you lay out your drawing. Now this entire layout of my composition using the gesture drawing technique, it took me a little bit more than 3 minutes. Now I know that seems really, really fast, and I've been drawing for a really long time. But you want to aim for maybe laying out your composition, I would say with a gesture drawing, maybe in 5 to 10 minutes max. You really want to get it on the paper very, very quickly. What you're doing is you're establishing the scale or the size of the drawing. Now that one leaf that's kind of hanging down there in the center, I started there. And now I'm building the other leaves, off of that one leaf. I'm looking at negative spaces between the leaves as I'm doing it, and I'm using my arm. Look how I'm using my arm. That is what gesture drawing is. I'm using my arm, swinging it around. Sometimes I just kind of swing my wrist around to make those curves. And I'm working light. I'm working and kind of loose and fast, but yet I'm still trying to get the, the leaves and the branches in an accurate position. So I discovered that little bit in there that's going to have the buds on it. So there's like little tiny buds. This is a plumeria tree. And I actually saw these trees when I was in India last summer, and they're growing in my backyard, so it's kind of awesome. Anyway, I'm going to continue with laying this out using the gesture drawing, and I'm almost done. Now I'm looking for, when I'm doing those angles there, I'm looking at where the branches are in relationship to each other, and you also want to make sure that you're drawing through. When you're drawing a branch, you want to kind of draw through the leaves. If there's a leaf in front of it, you want to just draw right through. And there's my gesture drawing. At this point, I'm starting my modified contour line drawing. And what you should do is you should switch your pencil to a 3B or an ebony pencil. Now when I make these videos, I actually do the entire drawing with an ebony pencil. I find with those pencils I can work light, but as I'm laying out my drawing, holding the pencil lightly and using the gestural line, it's still dark enough so you can see it in the video. So that's why I don't switch pencils. Okay, so with these leaves, they actually have the cross contour lines kind of built on them. And it shows you the kind of the direction the leaf is. Now the leaf doesn't have a whole lot of volumetric form. They're basically flat, but they curve around a little bit. The edges curl sometimes. So the veins in the leaves are going to give you an idea about the direction that the leaves are laying or situated in space. And here I'm just I was just touching up the edge of that leaf and perfecting it a little bit. There I'm sighting again. As I'm working on the modified contour line drawing, I've got to make sure that I'm perfecting my drawing. As I'm darkening up the lines, The gesture drawing was just to give me an idea about how big I was going to make everything, the placement on the page, and now with the modified contour line, I'm really studying the negative spaces between the shapes. So you can see that little triangular shape there, and you can also see with that stem there for the leaf that I drew it right through the other branch. Now, when you're working on branches and you're seeing them going in front of each other and behind each other, you want to draw through it, and you can always erase later. Now, with these leaves, sometimes like one side appeared a little bit wider and sometimes the other side appeared a little bit wider, so I was really aware of that. Here I'm just cleaning it up a little bit using a kneaded eraser. I do like the kneaded erasers because they don't leave the little eraser crumbs, but they don't erase the paper as well or bring it back to white as like a white vinyl eraser. All right, so here I'm working on placing those vines, the veins, not the vines, and that again shows you like kind of the direction the leaf is facing. Okay, and then sometimes like the angle it's flopping around. All right, so now I'm looking at the space between that leaf and this little tiny little stem, and as I was working outside, I got really fascinated with this whole area here. And I'm laying out those little tiny little buds, and I know that in the future that one day there are going to be these beautiful, really fragrant flowers. So I decided that I was going to make this really the focal point of my drawing, because it kind of captured my imagination as I was working on it. And I also thought it was really beautiful. These just tiny little buds, and just thinking about how one day they would be, such beautiful flowers. All right, so as I'm laying them out, I'm really looking at where the stems are coming out of that major stem, and kind of the curve as they come out there. Here, I was just looking at the negative space. Oh, this leaf, oh my gosh, this leaf is really foreshortened. When something is foreshortened, that means it is coming right at you. All right, so I blocked in that little foreshortened leaf. Here I'm working on a few more of the veins. Oh, I also should tell you that this part of the video, this modified contour line part, has been sped up. So you're seeing it at twice the speed that I was drawing. Because typically when you're working with a modified contour line, it's a much slower way to draw, much slower than gesture. So it's slower, it's more precise, and again, you're just observing what's in front of you and doing your best to record what you see. So anytime I work with curves, you'll see my wrist kind of swing around a little bit to get that curve right. Here I'm using a white vinyl eraser because I was a little bit heavy-handed on that curve, and I really want to get that graphite off the paper. Now, I was like lightly dusting the paper off with those erasure marks. Not a great practice because you don't want to smudge your paper, and graphite can smudge fairly easily. Look at that really super light line that I'm using to put on those veins, which are kind of serving as my cross contour lines there on the leaf. So I start off really light, and then as I end that line, I kind of pull my pencil up. And there was like that part of the leaf had a little curl in front of it, so I'm working on that part. I'm kind of adjusting the shape. So see, as I was working on this, I noticed that my initial curve was a little different, and there was an indentation. So you fix it. Remember, drawing is a series of refinements. You put something down on the paper, you check it out, you look back and forth, and if it works pretty well, looks pretty accurate to you, you leave it alone. But if you see something a little bit off, you change it. Now there was a little leaf behind there, but I don't want to draw that line too dark. And I also didn't want to draw that leaf in too much detail because it's behind it. So I'm keeping it lighter and less detail. All right, and I'll go back to that leaf and that stem later. I'll deal with it later. So at this point, I noticed, this is another cool part. There's these little tiny little baby leaves, and they're like coming up there, and they're like peeking out, like they're new to the world. And all right, anyway, now I'm back to that foreshortened leaf. I'm just cleaning that up a little bit. I'm fixing my, my contour line drawing there. Okay, now, what am I working on? Well, I'll tell you what I'm working on. I decided that the stem on that leaf on the bottom did not correspond or flow into that central vein. So this was, after I stepped back and had a good look at my drawing, and I wanted to shift that around. The other thing I did was, you'll notice now that I'm using a soft, kind of large watercolor brush to dust off those erasure crumbs from my drawing. So that's so I don't use my pencil and smear the graphite around. So that's a good practice. Now, if you have like a clean makeup brush, like no makeup on it, you can also use that too, but you want to use a soft brush. So now I'm kind of finishing up that little cluster of buds. That's my focal point there. And now I'm going to start working in some of those leaves that are in back of that main cluster of leaves that I drew in the beginning. So here I'm starting to think about, well, how am I going to show, some of those leaves that I don't want to be my focal point. Like I want them to kind of be in the drawing, but not to be as detailed. How am I going to go about doing those? So I'm going to start kind of using less detail as the drawing goes along, because I've established my focal point. I got in those, those leaves that are in the foreground, that means in the front. So now I'm working on this leaf here. It's kind of sticking up, and it looks really skinny because it's like kind of turned sideways a little bit, and one side appears slightly more than the other. Here you'll see me do those veins. See how I start a little bit darker, and then as the line extends out, I pull up a little bit. I want that line to like disappear at the end. So that's why I do that. So I'm still, throwing a few veins around there. And here I'm just cleaning up an area with an eraser. And then I'm drawing this really skinny leaf. A couple thin ones under there. And I'm looking at how they kind of stick out underneath those other leaves. And I'm looking at the direction of them. I'm also looking at the negative spaces between the different leaves. As you draw the spaces, it's those spaces between the branches, the spaces between the leaves, that's really, really going to help you get your drawing accurate. So that was a leaf with a little curl on the end, where they have that one side that kind of curls up. So the trick is you don't try to draw the curl when it curls up, you just draw what you see. I always say that, draw what you see and hope for the best. Yeah, so now just working on just placing some of those leaves, because there's, a lot of them in the background there. And I'm working on placing those. And that one had kind of an interesting, ruffly kind of shape in there. And then there's one behind. See how I'm drawing the ones behind with just a kind of a light contour line? And I'm not bothering too much with the veins, and I definitely don't want to get the edges darker in there. So I decided it was time to start working on this side of the drawing. Put in some more of the branches there. I just threw a few light veins in there. So there's another branch kind of heading in this way. So I'm going to start working with the modified contour line over here. And I'm really looking at some of the very subtle bends of the branches. I don't want my branch shapes to be like perfect, like perfect curves. They should be irregular, because that's what nature's like, you know? Nature has these beautiful kind of irregular forms. There I noticed my stem was a little too thick, and I was just cleaning it up a little bit. All right, more little light veins there. Okay, I'm working on the branch. You see what I mean with that line on the side of the branch? You know, you want to have some of those little tiny bends and twists and turns with your branch. One thing that's interesting too about trees, you know, it's fascinating to see how the young ones are all kind of like straight, and not all of them, but a lot of young trees are like, the branches are like pretty straight, and then as they get older, they get kind of, you know, they're growing towards the sun, or sometimes, you know, the wind affects them, the prevailing winds, and they end up twisted and turned and curved. So, love looking at trees and nature. So much fun. All right, so in here I'm just adding a few more leaves. Unfortunately, my video cuts off a little bit at the top of that drawing. You'll see it at the end. You probably too notice I'm wearing like a white cotton shirt with long sleeves. Whenever I'm going to be outside for a while, you know, you have to protect yourself against the sun. So like really thin white cotton shirts, they're kind of good to wear to do that. All right, so there I just laid in a branch, and as I was doing that again, I was like looking at that negative space in there. So, you know, those wide areas of negative space is what I was looking at. Here I thought, well, I'm going to clean up that leaf. I thought that edge should be darker. I had stepped back like before I made these finishing touches to my drawing. And you know, I'm darkening up the focal points a little bit, darkening up the leaves that are in front, you know, the areas that I want to stand out. So I'm working on that. And you'll see that I drew some cross contour lines around some of the branches. Yeah, so there you go. There's some of the cross contour lines. And I kind of lay those in really, really quickly. You know, you may want to take a little more time with yours. Now, do you see how my drawing has a varied finish? Like the focal point and that whole front cluster of leaves is pretty detailed, but then there's other areas of my drawing where maybe there's just a, you know, an outline and kind of a loose contour line around them. Here I'm working up that focal point with a few cross contour lines around them, darkening up, you know, kind of one side. The side that's in shadow, I'm just making that line a little thicker. A few more cross contour lines, you know, making that area, you know, that stem there really pop out and look 3D. I thought that side of that leaf needed to be just a little darker. I wanted to clean it up with my eraser, a little bit in there. And I'm pretty close to being finished. Now, for the sake of the video, I figured I was finished enough. If I stayed and worked on this drawing some more, I would probably work maybe a little bit more on the, you know, maybe more on the branch on the right side, on the far right side. Here I'm just adding a few more details just to wrap things up. And enjoy your drawing outside, you know, being in nature. And it was wonderful out there, hearing the birds. And yeah, and every once in a while, you know, especially if you're drawing in public, somebody might come by and talk to you, and that can be kind of fun too. There I'm just fixing up that edge of the leaf just a little bit more. And a few more finishing touches on that leaf that's, you know, right there in the foreground. And down. And that pretty much finishes that up. Okay. And I hope you really love being out there in nature and have fun with your drawing.